I reckon I'll be back before sundown.
You be careful out there, Jacob.
I will. Keep the gun close. Keep the gun close.
Cooper Lang rode home after 2 years given up for dead, expecting to find his land seized, his house dark, and the whole of the life he'd left behind swallowed by the bank and the weeds. What he found instead was smoke curling from his own chimney, his fields green and tended, his cattle fat in the corral, and a quiet woman he had never seen before in his life, stepping out onto his porch to ask who he was. He had left the cottonwood country 2 years and 3 months before, a grieving, indebted man with nothing to lose. His wife Annie had died of a fever the winter before that, and the grief of it had hollowed him out. And on top of the grief sat the debt, a note at the Cedar Springs Bank that he and Annie had taken to build their place, and that Cooper, alone now, and barely able to make himself rise in the mornings, had no earthly way to pay. He was going to lose the land they'd built together, and the only thing worse than losing Annie, he'd decided, was losing the last thing of hers he still had. So when a cattle outfit came through hiring drovers for a long, dangerous, high-paying drive, 2,000 head, clear up the territory and over the mountains to the railhead, through hard country and harder weather, the kind of drive that paid double because half the men who started it didn't finish, Cooper Lang had signed on without a second thought. 1 season's wages, he'd reckoned, would clear the note and save his land. He'd be gone 4 months, 5 at the outside. He told the bank he'd be back with the money before the year was out. And he rode away from his empty house and Annie's grave and pointed himself north. It went wrong the way only the frontier can. The drive was caught high in the mountains by the most savage winter in living memory. The killing winter that buried the range and froze cattle by the 100,000 and stranded men where they stood. The herd was lost near all of it. And Cooper, fighting to save what stock he could, took a fall on the ice that broke his leg in 2 places and laid him up, far from any home, in a settlement snowed off from the world for months. By the time he could ride, he'd missed a whole season, had no wages, and no way to get word south that he was even alive. He made his way back slow, and a second winter caught him on the road and held him another long, cold while, so that when Cooper Lang finally came down the Cottonwood Road, 2 years and 3 months had passed, and every soul who knew him had long since given him up for dead. He came home expecting nothing. He'd had 2 years to make his peace with it. The bank would have seized the place the moment his payment failed and word spread that he'd died. The house empty, sold, fallen in. Annie's grave lost in the weeds. He came home only to stand one last time on the ground he'd built with her, say goodbye, and drift off to wherever a ruined man drifts. He had no hope left in him at all, which is why the smoke from the chimney stopped him cold a quarter mile down the road. He sat his tired horse and stared. Smoke, his chimney. The fences along the road, mended and sound. The fields he'd left fallow, plowed and green with a standing crop. As he rode closer, disbelieving, he saw cattle in the corral. Not his old herd, lost on the mountain, but cattle, good ones, fat and tended. The barn roof was patched. The yard was swept. The whole place, which should by every right have been a ruin or a stranger's prize, stood alive and cared for, and somehow more whole than he'd left it. As though the 2 years he'd been dying in the mountains, someone had been here, loving his land back to life. And then the door opened, and a woman came out onto his porch, drying her hands on her apron, and stopped dead at the sight of the gaunt stranger on the worn horse in her yard. For a long moment neither of them spoke. She was perhaps 40, plain and weathered and strong-looking, with the kind of steady face that has known hard work and harder loss. She looked at Cooper the way you look at a thing that cannot possibly be real. "This is the Lang place," Cooper finally said, his voice rusty from disuse. "My place. I'm Cooper Lang." He watched her face. "Or it was, before I. Who are you? What are you doing on my land?" The color went out of the woman's face entirely, and she gripped the porch rail as though her legs had gone. "Cooper Lang," she whispered. They said you died. On the drive, the killing winter, everyone said. The bank, the whole town. Cooper Lang's dead on the mountain." She pressed a hand to her mouth. "You're alive." "I'm alive," he said, baffled by the depth of feeling in a stranger's face. "Barely, and 2 years late. But ma'am, I don't know you. How do you know my name? How is it my place is standing, when by rights the bank should have had it the day I missed my payment?" He swung down stiff from his horse, wary now. "Who are you?" And the woman, her eyes brimming, her voice unsteady, told him the thing that would undo him completely. "My name is Maud Calvert," she said, "and you don't know me, Mr. Lang, but I have known your name for 7 years and prayed it every night, and you saved my whole life once and rode off before I could so much as learn your face." She drew a shaking breath. "And when I heard you'd died and that the place you'd loved was about to be taken, I came to pay you back, the only way I had left." Cooper stared at her. "I never saved anybody's life. I'd remember a thing like that." "You wouldn't," Maud said with a sad, small smile. "That's the whole of it. It was nothing to you. It was everything to me." And she told him. 7 years before, she said, she'd been a young widow on a hardscrabble homestead, 2 counties east. Her husband 3 months in the ground. A small, cruel debt come due that she had no way on earth to pay. The bank set to take her farm and turn her out with nothing in the dead of winter. She'd been at the very end of herself. No family, no money, nowhere to go. A young woman about to be put out into the snow to starve. And a stranger had come through. A quiet man passing on the road who'd heard, in the town, of the widow about to lose everything over a sum that to a man with means was almost nothing. And that stranger had ridden out to the bank and paid her debt in full, every dollar, saving her farm and her life, and refused to give more than a first name, telling the banker only that somebody had once helped him when he was down, and he was passing it on, and she owed him nothing but to do the same someday for somebody else. Then he'd ridden away, and she'd never even seen his face, only learned later the name of the man who'd saved her. Cooper Lang of the Cottonwood country. "You don't remember it," Maud said, the tears running now. "I believe you. A man with a heart big enough to do a thing like that for a stranger doesn't keep count of it. But I kept count, Mr. Lang. I kept your name like a prayer for 7 years. You gave me my whole life back and asked for nothing. And then last year I heard, my own farm was long gone by then, my second husband dead too, and me drifting and alone again. I heard in a town that Cooper Lang had died on the Killing Winter Drive, and that the Cottonwood Bank was about to seize his place for an unpaid note, with no kin to claim it." She lifted her chin, and I thought, here is the one thing I can do. Here is how I pay back the man who saved me, now that he's gone where he'll never know. I'll save his land the way he saved mine. Cooper Lang stood in his own yard and could not speak. She'd come with nothing, she told him. The last few dollars she had, and she'd gone to the Cedar Springs Bank and begged them to let her take up the note, a strange widow with no claim, paying what little she could against the debt of a dead man, and working the land to make it pay the rest. The bank, who'd have rather had the money than the trouble of selling an out-of-the-way ranch in a bad year, had let her. And Maud Calvert had moved onto the Lang place alone, and worked it the way she'd worked her own farms her whole hard life. Plowed the fields, mended the fences, bought a few head with her last savings and built them up, kept the debt paid down dollar by dollar through 2 years of brutal labor, holding the land, keeping it alive, saving it for a dead man who would never come, purely to repay a kindness he'd long forgotten. "I tended your wife's grave too," she said quietly. "I didn't know her, but I knew it mattered to the man who saved me. It's up on the rise. I keep flowers on it in the season. I hope it wasn't a liberty." And Cooper Lang, hollowed out and hopeless, put his face in his weathered hands and wept. For Annie, for 2 lost years, and for the unbearable fact that while he'd been dying in the mountains, a stranger he couldn't even remember had been here loving his land and his wife's grave back to life, asking nothing for herself in return. "I came home to say goodbye to it," he said when he could speak. "I thought it was all gone. Annie, the land, all of it. I came back to stand here one last time and then drift off, and, I don't know, I had nothing left." He looked at the thriving place, and at the woman who'd saved it. "And you've been here the whole time, keeping it, keeping her." He shook his head, overwhelmed. "Maud, there's no thanking this. There's no thanking it at all." "You don't owe me thanks," Maud said simply. "I owed you, for 7 years, and now it's paid, and the land's yours. Free and tended and waiting for you, the way it should be." She straightened, and there was something both proud and infinitely sad in it. "I'll gather my things. It's your home, and you're alive, thank God. and there's no call for me here anymore. I only ever came to hold it for you. I'll be gone by morning, and you needn't worry over me. I'm used to moving on." And she turned to go inside and pack. This woman, who had given 2 years of her life to save the home of a dead man, and now meant to walk away from it with nothing the moment he returned, asking not one thing for herself. "Wait," Cooper said. She stopped. He looked at her, really looked, at the plain, strong, weathered woman standing on his porch, who had loved his land better than he'd been able to in his grief, who'd kept his wife's grave with flowers, who'd repaid a forgotten kindness with 2 years of her own life, and meant now to vanish back into a hard, lonely road without a word of want. And something moved in Cooper Lang's chest that had not moved since Annie died. Not the old grief, but something on the far side of it, something that felt impossibly like the first warmth after a long, killing winter. "I can't work this place alone," he said slowly. "That's the plain truth of it. I'm half crippled from the mountain, and I've been gone 2 years, and you know this land now better than I do. You've been the making of it while I was away. It'd be a foolishness to send the one person who knows it best off down the road." He paused. "Stay, help me work it. I'll pay you a fair wage. A partner's share, whatever's right. You saved it. You ought to have a place on it." He swallowed. "Don't go, Maud. Stay." Maud Calvert searched his face a long moment. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. "Out of obligation, I told you. The debt's paid. You don't owe me a home." "It's not obligation," Cooper said. "Or it didn't start as anything but. But you've kept my whole world alive for 2 years. And I rode in here a dead man with nothing left. And the first living thing I've felt since Annie passed is standing right here telling me she's leaving." He shook his head. "Stay, not because you owe me, and not because I owe you. Stay because I'm asking you to, and because I think we've both been alone about long enough." She stayed. It started as the partnership he'd offered. 2 people working the same beloved ground, careful and respectful, each grateful and each a little wary. But you cannot work a piece of land beside someone, season after season, sharing the labor and the weather and the quiet suppers at the end of the long days, without coming to know them all the way down. Cooper learned Maud's story in pieces. The 2 husbands buried, the farms lost, the hard-drifting life of a woman alone, the deep, steady goodness in her that had sent her across 2 counties to repay a stranger's kindness. And Maud watched the hollowed-out grieving man she'd found in the yard slowly fill back up with life. Watched Cooper Lang come back to himself, season by season, on the land she'd saved for him, until the grief for Annie settled into its proper genital place and left room, at last, for something new. They fought the bank together that first year, and cleared the note for good, the 2 of them. And the day the banker stamped the Lang place free and clear, they rode home, and Cooper looked at the land, green and sound and theirs, saved twice over now, once by her and once by them together, and he understood that the thing Maud Calvert had saved was never only the land. "You know what's strange," he told her. One gold evening, the 2 of them on the porch, where she'd first stepped out to ask him who he was. "7 years ago, I paid off a stranger's debt because somebody once did the same for me, and I forgot it inside a month. It cost me almost nothing." He shook his head slowly, and it came back. 2 years I was dying in the mountains, and the whole time that one small forgotten thing was down here saving my home and Annie's grave and me, Maud. It saved me. "That's how it works, I think," Maud said. "The good you do doesn't keep count of itself. It just waits and comes back when you need it most." She smiled at him. "I came to pay a debt. I didn't expect to find a home. I surely didn't expect to find." She stopped, coloring. "To find what?" Cooper asked gently. "A reason to stop drifting," she said. "A place I didn't want to leave. A man I—" She stopped again and looked at him, plain and brave. "I came to pay you back, Cooper Lang, and somewhere in 2 years it stopped being a debt and started being the only home I've ever wanted. I don't know what that makes us." Cooper Lang took the hand of the woman who'd saved everything, and he knew exactly what it made them. They married that autumn on the rise near Annie's well-tended grave, because Maud said Annie ought to be part of it, having been part of the land that brought them together. And Cooper loved her the more for saying it. And the Lang place thrived for 40 years under the 2 of them. The land that a forgotten kindness had saved, worked by the woman who'd repaid it, and the man who'd never known he'd cast that kindness out into the world like a seed. He had come home from 2 years given up for dead, expecting to find nothing left at all, and found instead a quiet woman tending his fields who had loved his home back to life out of gratitude for a kindness he couldn't even remember. And in the end, he understood the truest thing there is to know, that no kindness is ever really lost, that the smallest good you do for a stranger has a way of coming home to you when you need it most, and that sometimes a man rides back from the dead expecting only to say goodbye and finds instead, waiting in his own yard, the whole rest of his life.